Hello and welcome to the Last Word on Spurs. We are, of course, your multi-award winning Tottenham Hotspur podcast. Don't look too terrified. Don't look too scared. When you've got this caliber of guest joining us at this kind of time, you'd be worried, you'd be panicked, you'd be frightened. Don't! Or should you be? If it was your very first time, you can find us. We're on iTunes, we're on Spotify, across all major audio platforms. Look, we're back with you with a big Tottenham update in the world of Spurs, because as we know with Tottenham, despite going in to an international break, Tottenham never, ever sleeps. And when Tottenham never sleeps at this kind of night, and you see this man alongside me, and we're going to bring in our wonderful special guest joining us, you know there is news happening in the Spurs sphere, and it relates financially. Back alongside me is the wonderful Conor over at Levy 1882. Con, how are you? Lovely to see you here.
Yeah, lovely to see you. Thanks for having me back on, and great to be on with Martin as well, particularly with today's news, which obviously we're gonna jump into in some detail. So yeah, good to be on.
People would think this was planned. What, are people crazy? Do we have planned shows like this? I'm not too sure. Back on the show, he dropped us a big exclusive a couple of weeks ago over a certain gentleman's interest in buying Tottenham. We've had some clarity as to where that is at. We're bringing back long-time friend of the show, been with us for many, many years. He's got a smile on his face. He's seen a wonderful start to Spurs' reign under Thomas Frank. We even heard him in some of the press conferences. That how much invested. He's back now. He's actually back in the presses as well. We've got the wonderful, of course, chief correspondent at The Sun. We've got the superb Martin Lipton back on. Martin, lovely to have you here. How are you?
Good evening, both. Yes. Well, we've had an interesting few weeks, haven't we? So all is good.
Absolutely.
Never a quiet time at N17, as we know, and lots to disinter in a number of ways. So hopefully this will be quite an entertaining hour or so as well.
Absolutely. I mean, Martin, you do know you got us very, very excited. Many of us very, very excited a few weeks ago. Look, there's some out there that would say we weren't excited, but people were excited. I think when you told us that news about this certain DJ that was going to come in and bring us Spurs 2.0, I think we're all kind of gearing to some excitement as to what's to come, because I think, to be fair, at the moment we stand a bit of the unknown when it comes to the Lewis family, because they have been part of Spurs, whether you want to see how much involvement they've had over the last 24, 25 years in the background. And at the moment, there's a relative unknown about their ambition. You know, from what we're being told, they want to see Spurs win more. They are ambitious. They want to take the club forward. But I know for many out there, it's going to have to be actions rather than words. So it's going to be very telling as to, in the near future, what that is going to look like. Before I bring the guys back in, just to bring everybody up to date in what we've heard over this last 24 hours, the news has come through to us that Brooklyn Earick has confirmed to the London Stock Exchange that he and his consortium does not intend to make a firm offer for a Tottenham Hotspur takeover. Now, Martin brought us that exclusive a couple of weeks ago that the tech entrepreneur, and as many people out there are aware, he failed earlier in the year in a bid to acquire the Formula E team Maserati, was fronting the 3.3 billion takeover approach from a 12-strong group from the US, including NFL and NBA investors, with a further 1.2 billion reportedly set aside as transfer funds for head coach Thomas Frank. However, after a lot, you've got to say, of posturing in these last few weeks on social media, a statement was lodged with the stock exchange on Monday, which did read, further to the announcement made by the board of Tottenham Hotspur Limited on the 26th of September 2025 regarding an informal expression of interest in relation to a proposal to acquire the entire issued and to be issued share capital of the company. Mr. Brooklyn Earick confirms that he does not intend to make a firm offer for the company. Now, that update does follow the news from last week that the Asia-based consortiums of investors, led by Firehawk Holdings Limited, had also confirmed they would not be bidding for a takeover of Spurs. And as many are aware, earlier in the month, Spurs announced that they had received and unequivocally rejected separate preliminary expressions of interest in relation to proposals to acquire the entire issued and to be issued share capital of ENIC from PCP International Finance Limited and a consortium of investors led by Dr. Roger Kennedy and Wing Fei through Firehawk Holdings. Now, PCP soon confirmed they would not be following up with a bid on Friday, and the Asia consortium led by Firehawk did the same. So it has been, like I say, quite an interesting development over the last certain few weeks. And Spurs did release that statement to the stock exchange on Monday saying the board of Tottenham Hotspur notes the recent announcements from Firehawk and Mr. Earick's consortiums that they do not intend to make an offer for the club. The board thanks them for their constructive approach taken in the discussions with the club and the Lewis family's representatives, and respecting the clear position of the Lewis family that the club is not for sale. So following the announcements made by those consortiums, the club is no longer in an offer period under the City Code on takeovers and mergers. So that's the latest in regards to that's what we've had from Tottenham. I suppose before we go to Martin, Con, just to come to you, maybe if you want to give the audience some clarity on that. Many might ask, what does that mean now that any other offers can be launched during this period? Do you want to clarify that, Connor, for any of those fans out there that might want that clarity?
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't read too much into this point about the offer period closing, because it's suddenly reopen if a new entity comes into the fray with an expression of interest. I think the point is that all of those that were in play before have now come out of play. So, right now there's no reason for Tottenham to be included on the takeover panel disclosure table. And so it will now mean that basically you would need a brand new consortium or brand new potential owner to come in with an offer before we would then have to see another disclosure. So, but I mean, look, I think the thing is what this is showing, I suppose, is certainly for now, the Lewis family seem to be quite clear in their convictions that the club is not for sale. Now, obviously, that isn't to say that might not change tomorrow, given how quick things can move at Tottenham, as we all know. But certainly for now, it seems that they seem clear in their convictions. I think, Rick, when we spoke about this very, very originally, when the first, perhaps when Levy went, my theory was that they may look to sell Levy's stake and stay in the game for 18 months or so at least, to try and fatten up that turkey a little bit more and exit at a higher price and benefit from the upside perhaps of a minority investor who takes on Levy's stake and is able to meet the cash requirements to fund the club in the same way that they will need to over 18, 24 months, and then look to sell it for a greater value. So it'd be great to get Martin's perspective on that as well, and his viewpoint. But yeah, I think it's I don't think anyone's particularly shocked that this one hasn't gone through, given how it's a huge deal and there's a huge sort of there's lots of moving parts, and the Lewis family do seem to be wanting to stick around for a bit.
Con, thank you so much. Martin, let's bring you in. It's been an interesting few weeks for you, I think it's fair to say. I can imagine your inbox has been pretty much bombarded since the moment that you brought us that exclusive story a couple of weeks ago. You give us your reaction, Martin.
There's been a bit of interest, yeah. I can't pretend otherwise.
I'll tell you why, though, Martin. I mean, look, you're a long-term friend of the show, and I think people know, because you are a genuine Spurs fan, I think people know there's a credibility there where you'd only be putting out a story that you've got it from your trusted sources where that's come from. And I think that's why there's been that genuine interest and intrigue by your story.
Look, the reality is that I was approached by somebody 10 days or so ago, and my first thought was, not sure about that. But the person who approached me, I know is extremely well connected. They've been approached by Brooklyn Earick after an American sports league had vouched for his credibility. So that immediately gives you a sense of, well, hang on, there's obviously something in this. The issue I had really was to make a call whether if I'm going to run this story, I either run it properly or I don't run it at all, because you can't do a story like this in 6 paragraphs. You've got to give it a full rein. So I took, given what I knew about the person who approached me and the assurances he'd received, I decided to give it a bit of credibility and run the story. When the next day Spurs Earick confirmed they've had the approach, then there's the proof that it was a genuine conversation. And then Brooklyn Earick plays quite heavily on social media, as we saw. Now, it's quite interesting. Some people say, oh, look, he's pulled all those social media posts. It shows he wasn't serious. Well, the reason he pulled the post is because he was told by the takeover panel that he was in breach of their regs and he couldn't do it, and he had to pull the post. So therefore, that was a rationale. That's why he suddenly went private on all his social media settings, because he was under a little bit of an arm lock from takeover panel, etc., and these sort of financial watchdogs. My understanding is that their conversations went on for at least a week after the Spurs statement, but it was made clear to him that the Levy family was serious about we're in for the immediate haul. I don't necessarily think long haul, but immediate haul. And also, I believe, though I can't firm this up, that one of the main sources, because he was just putting the consortium together, he wasn't the money man. He's got a few bob, but he's not got $3.5 billion. The one of the most serious backers he'd lined up got cold feet, and therefore suddenly it was going to be harder to get over the line. Lewis is going to say no to 3.3. Would they say no to 4 or 4.3? You know, it could then become a negotiation if you've actually got the financial backing. So in the end, that didn't happen, and a decision was made over the weekend, I'm told. My understanding, I was given indication this morning that this was going to happen today, and then it got to 4:30, and I thought it's not going to happen today because the stock market shut. And then lo and behold, at 5:30, it did happen today. So at least I was aware that this was going to happen. What does it mean going forward? I still think the Lewis family have always wanted to sell. The issue is the price at which they sell. As I've said to you before, they were in conversations about selling in 2008, and the bid was 250 million, and they wanted 400 million. Now, as we know, that asking price has gone up, well, 10 times probably, if not more, maybe 15 times. But the way that they're going to realise that sort of level of price of 5 billion plus is fattening up the beast, whether that be a turkey or a calf or whatever. It's still the same thing, which means spending money in the short term over the next 2 or 3 windows to win more, to make the club more, alluring to a potential buyer, to then sell. And that's what I still think will happen. In the short term, though, that is probably good news for Thomas Frank and good news for the fans, because they will have to start spending money. And of course, as Conor will tell you, Spurs have got far more wriggle room on PSR while it exists, and even SCR, if and when that comes in, than most clubs. Now, the squad cost ratio rules for UEFA are you spend 70% maximum of your revenues on wages and transfers. Well, we know that Tottenham's ratio is 43%. So there's an immediately large sum there. Squad on PSR, again, Spurs could probably spend 250 million, particularly when you amortise over 5 years on those contracts, probably even more, and it wouldn't touch the sides on a PSR calculation. So they have a huge amount of room for whoever is the owner to acquire. Now, of course, over the long term, you've got to start getting that money back, and it's the issue that Chelsea may face in 2 or 3 years, and Aston Villa are facing already. That if you spend a lot of money, you've got to get some return on it. But in the short term, if you have the latitude that Tottenham have had, they could certainly spend a considerable amount over 2 or 3 windows. Of course, you've got to also factor in the fact that in January, you can only change 3 members of your Champions League squad. And if Kulusevski is fit, why would you not want to bring him in? You know, so the things you might want to do. Likewise, you know, if Maddison was to be ahead of schedule and be in line to be back by March, again, you have to think about that. So there's all of these extra factors as well. But I do think that over the next 2-3 windows, you will see whomever is in charge, significant acquisition, a strengthening of the squad. You know, just look over the road at that lot down the other end of the Seven Sisters Road. Look at the squad that they've put together. The fact that they actually now don't look any weaker if they lose one of their best players, because they got quality to come in. You know, they lose Saliba and you've got Mosquera or Hincapie. You lose Madueke or Saka, and the other one can come in. You lose. they are, Odegaard doesn't play, it's okay, we'll put Eze in there, or we'll play whomever else. That strength in depth makes a huge difference. Now, Tottenham, well, I think the squad is not terrible. There's nowhere near the strength in depth that Arsenal have got. No. And as we're seeing at the moment, when we haven't got a 9 on the pitch, we're struggling to create chances. The results have been better, I think, probably than the performances have been. And a lot of that's due to the organisation of the team. But you really don't want to have such a fall off. And we've seen it over the last year, but even, particularly in the Ange years when, you lost 2 or 3 players and it was a shambles. The whole thing fell apart. Now, the one thing that's been useful, of course, this year is that thus far, at least, probably because the left centre half hasn't got to sprint 40 times a game, you've had Romero and Van der Ven on the pitch for most of the matches. And guess what? When that happens, results are better. But if there is an injury, do you not want a better upgrade than Danzo or Davis or the Romanian chap, who I've always said is the softest hard man I've ever seen? So there is where you already got to look to do things in not just this window, but the one after as well.
Yeah, I think it's fair points on that. I mean, so I wonder, Con, on that point that Martin's raised there, is it then, if we're looking at the fact that ENIC are in now for what is seen to be more of a shorter, longer term, if we put it in that kind of phrase, is one way of doing that, like Martin said, because of the restrictions around what they can do potentially in the January transfer window? Is it about looking at maybe some of the current members of the squad and where they can maybe tie down some of their assets even longer? And I'm maybe looking at someone like Mickey van der Ven, for example, which I think many Spurs fans would say is probably part of the long-term future at Spurs. We've seen them recently tie down Rodrigo Bentancur, of course, to a longer-term deal. Is that where there's some real quick wins there for you, Conor, potentially, maybe?
Yeah, I think so. And Rick, I enjoyed that you used ENIC rather than the Lewis family, and that you're not accepting their rebrand, which they're pushing massively. And Dave Harris has just commented similar. Yeah, I think look, whatever people's views are, January is more difficult naturally to do business. We make it painstakingly difficult in the past, but for every football club, it is more difficult. So I think most reasonable fans are probably willing to give the club, January plus next summer to really see whether this new rebrand of ENIC is going to actually operate differently to how it has for the last 24 years. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see. And I think you're right. There definitely is some contract pieces. I think the other indicator that we'll get at some point is, it's quite clear to everyone that there needs to be a capital injection now from the owners. Tottenham, as everyone knows, ENIC have only injected, up until the last set of accounts, an average of £5 million per year of their own money, right? Which is by far the lowest as an average for any ownership group outside of the Glazers. So, given where the club needs to go in terms of being able to grow now, so to grow further, what Tottenham need to do is qualify for the Champions League every year. We've sort of exhausted to some extent the revenues that we can get organically through the stadium, etc., other than naming rights. So you've got naming rights as one thing. Then the other way to grow our revenue is by delivering sustained success. And obviously that's what the Lewis family keep talking about. That's their aim, is to deliver long-term sustained success. We'll see whether that happens. So we need to be qualifying for the Champions League year in, year out, which will then grow commercial revenue as well. And to do that, we're going to have to spend a lot of money on players, right? So they are going to have to inject some cash, as well as what needs to happen on the playing side of things. They've got some pretty capital intensive property projects to finish. The hotel, there's still the residential blocks that need to be finished. So, I think it'll be interesting to see over the last couple of months. And obviously there was lots of rumours that in the summer they were going to inject some capital. We haven't seen that come through yet. But we may see that, and when we do, we'll see the company's house filing if they inject it the way that they normally do, which is an equity injection. Yep. So those sort of things will give us some signs that they are changing. But yeah, I think it's going to be difficult to really see. I mean, there was a slight change, I think, in the summer. we've spoken about it a few times, Rick, in terms of the type of profile of player that was targeted, and certainly the wages that would have gone to the likes of Simmons and Kudus and Paulinho, Muani, which is different to what has happened in the last couple of windows. But I wouldn't say the transfer spend was particularly any different to what we've spent generally in summer windows since we moved into the new stadium. So, I think there's still a lot of unanswered questions for Spurs fans as they see what this new era of ownership looks like.
Yeah, just on that point of unanswered questions, Martin, I don't think we've had you back on since Daniel Levy has departed the club. So, I mean, even then, still with Daniel Levy's role and the fact Conor's very kindly given us this illustration of the structure at Tottenham, Daniel Levy and Family Trust still have 29.88% of the club, while the Lewis Family Trust owns 70.12%. I just have to get your take. There was a recent story with relation to Daniel Levy and where his role currently sits at Spurs. And look, the fact is, we know he was, pretty much what everyone had known for the almost quarter of a century, right? I mean, everything revolved around Tottenham and Daniel Levy. He ran the club with real total knowledge, total control, and his word, it seemed, was always final. But from what we've heard from some reports out there, when Levy was sacked on September the 4th, he wasn't even allowed back into the training centre to retrieve his possessions, and nor was his wife Tracy, who worked at the club until the day Daniel Levy was sacked. And there are reports suggesting that Daniel Levy's belongings were eventually returned by a van. I mean, it all does sound absolutely crazy. I just want to get your take on what you've made of Daniel's exit and what you believe his future to look like, because he still owns part of the football club. How do you see that really working out in the near future? Do you expect him to be bought out eventually, Martin?
I think he'll be bought out fairly quickly, actually.
Okay.
I do think that there's going to be some significant conversations between Daniel Levy and the Lewis family, stroke Earick, however we're going to describe them. And I think there may well be a rather swift arrangement that's reached. I think there's the speed with which he was dispatched is an indicator that something significant has gone awry in that relationship. It can't have happened over a long term. I don't know what, but it seems to be an issue. That there seems to be an issue that has caused this rupture, actually, out of nowhere, because clearly Daniel Levy didn't see it coming. We did think that when Donna Cullen went and when Charrington came in, that there would be, and obviously Vinay coming in as well, that there was a changing of the tectonic plates, but we didn't expect a Vesuvian explosion, which is what happened effectively. And I think that indicates something significant happened over a relatively small period of time. What that was, I do not know, but clearly there's been a major issue there. I can't see that they would want anyone to have 30% of their entity, which is basically what he's got. So there's an obvious way out of that, is to find a deal, find a price at which he'd sell. What that price is dependent on what he thinks the club is worth, I guess. But I do think that it's impossible for him to have. In the end, someone who's got that size of stake becomes a problem, because it's not quite a blocking minority, but it can be a substantial issue for potential investors going forward. Remember, if you make a bid for Spurs, you've got to make a bid for the whole company. You've got to bid 100%. Now, does Lewis family, Vivian and Charles and whatever Joe still thinks about it? Obviously, it's nothing to do with the club. No. Joe Lewis has got no involvement in Tottenham Hotspur. Never has. Oh no, he did, but not anymore. Don't worry. It's all the Lewis family trust. Yeah. Okay. Nothing to do with getting around Premier League rules, because he would be banned from being a director because he's been found guilty of a major criminal offence, which he was in the US. Not at all. Nevertheless. So I don't think they would want Daniel Levy to be getting 30% of whatever they realise. If it were to be 5 billion, that means he gets 1.5 billion. Well, they don't want him to get that, do they? So I think that moves will be are afoot potentially to end that status. But if you're Levy, why would you play softball? You're going to play hardball unless you haven't got any option in the matter. I don't think that's the case, is it? So, it's going to be a drawn out battle, but I do think that eventually Levy will go, and I think it's finite his involvement in terms of having that share capital.
Just before I bring Conor back in, what have you made, Martin, of the suggestions that have been out there with regards to maybe Daniel Levy being a potential blocker when it comes to investment and stadium naming rights, which has been one of the main things that have really been kind of being banded around over the last 3, 4, 5 years, the lack of Tottenham being able to get stadium naming rights over the line. I mean, again, there was that suggestion that it suited Tottenham having it be the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium and having that brand worldwide. I mean, do you buy into any of that Daniel Levy has been a blocker with regards to investment or stadium naming rights? Because it is very bizarre. He leaves the football club and then suddenly we have a flurry of offers coming through the door pretty much as soon as he left the club, or pretty much as soon as it was announced he would be stood down as chairman.
Well, I think he made such a thing of getting naming rights in that I can't believe he didn't want to do the deal. The issue seems to be that the price he set was too high, and that he wanted my understanding, and I might be entirely wrong here, he wanted an extremely front-loaded deal. So it may have been 250 million over 10 years, and you only get one chance to really rebrand a stadium. Once you've done it once, its value is, when you do it again, it's not worth as much. You get one go for a big hit. He wanted a lot of that money up in the first 2 or 3 years, and people weren't that keen to pay that, it would appear, because he must have got through 3 or 4 execs whose only job was to actually get the deal over the line, and they've all left, and they're still 6 years later they're still not a naming rights partner. So that's bizarre in itself. One of them just turned up at Chelsea, hasn't he, Klein? So, and apparently he's going to get naming rights for their new stadium, which ain't been built yet. Oh, good luck. Very bizarre. Anyhow, but I do think that when it came to potential investment, Daniel was very keen on pushing for a sale, right, as long as he could stay in charge. And if you want to buy a train set, you want to be able to put the batteries in and decide on the track and the direction, and not be told by somebody else that I'm actually on the boilerplate still, we're going the other way, even if you want to go this way. And that, I think, was an issue.
Right.
I don't know for certain, because I'm not, unfortunately, if I was, great, but I'm not party to these conversations as a rule.
Yeah.
I would that I were. But that is the sense and essence of what I get from people I've spoken to and have heard of. But what happens next, we will see. I think that in a post-Levy environment, it's easier to find a sale at some point. And to answer the question from Jamie Pepper, yeah, it is the wrong way round. The door handle. Don't ask. That's all I can say.
I love the fact that some of the comments on there, for listeners and audio, the out of context takes an audio. No one would have an absolute clue what we're talking about. But yeah, Martin's door handle, for those that are watching the show live on our YouTube platform, is the wrong way around. Right, okay.
There's lots of reasons for that, but it's not in the greater scheme of things, it isn't the biggest deal. But it is a fair question, and I can't argue otherwise.
I mean, here we are trying to get a sale with the football club, and here we are questioning where Martin's door handles the right way or the wrong way around. Let me come to you, Con, in terms of your feelings with regards to Daniel Levy, because it's been a few weeks since we've discussed this subject. I mean, our wives must just think we're two quite sad little men that are here at up past 10 at night discussing where the finances are at Spurs. But it's intriguing. It's intriguing. I don't want to put Martin into that. Sorry, Martin, if I'm throwing you into that as well, by the way. He's got an early flight in the morning. Where are you on Daniel Levy for you at the moment? I mean, do you think, similar to Martin, that they'll look very quickly to, if the right word is, oust him, or do you think he will eventually move on in the near future rather than longer term? Where are you on that for you with Daniel Levy and his position right now? Because all the suggestions are, he's not got access to the training ground, he's not got access to the stadium. For want of a better word, what's been alleged by The Athletic, I think the story was run, he's banned at the moment from even entering the premises.
Yeah, and I mean, I probably have to be consistent with my initial view on this, which was that I I don't. It feels a little bit soap opera-y to me, in that this massive fallout, and I I think where I came out from before was it's not really in anyone's interest for there to be a split which is not amicable, because ultimately you need to get into a position where if they do ultimately look to sell the club, they don't really want Levy being there and making life difficult for them afterwards. However, I think where I've probably developed that view a little bit has been that I think look, Levy is many things. Stupid, he's not, as I've said before, and I think he probably realised that there was some sort of succession writing on the wall type stuff when Charrington was put into post back in March. Then you get a CEO in June, right? In Vinay. And it never quite made sense to have Levy as executive chairman and then Vinay as CEO, because you've got massive crossover in terms of the jobs, and so they've gone to the structure that you actually expect now with a non-exec chairman and a CEO. So there, all of those movements suggested something. There were writings on the wall. I think probably what has been accelerated perhaps has been the timeline. I suspect what has maybe happened is that Lewis family know that they've got to put some cash in now. In the past, in those limited examples where cash was put in, Joe Lewis would have fronted that cash and Levy still benefited from it because his shareholding went up, even though he probably himself wasn't actually putting cash in. And I think that maybe Vivian and the others are not quite willing to do that in the same way, right? And I think there's probably been a bit of a to-do about that and a bit of a conversation about, look, you don't have the cash, Daniel Levy. You're very wealthy, but you don't have the type of cash that is needed to be injected into the football club. We're not willing to front that for you anymore and have you still benefit from getting increased shareholding, and therefore you need to move on. And so I think, I think Martin and I are both in agreement that they'll look to get Levy out because they'll want someone to replace his 30% stake. And, it might even be them, right? They might even buy him out of that. I doubt it. I think they'll probably look for someone external to come in who can help front some cash. Now, the challenge with that, obviously, is finding someone and Martin raised the point, finding someone who's happy to be a minority shareholder, because we saw this at Crystal Palace with John Textor, right? John Textor came in to start with a stake in Palace, but it was not a majority, and he got upset pretty quickly because he realised he didn't have control. And so, finding a minority shareholder who's happy to play second fiddle to the Lewis family for a period is going to be difficult. But perhaps if there's this promise of, okay, you start as with Levy's share, and then over time you buy us out completely, which is probably what you're going to see with Ratcliffe and the Glazers in due course. So yeah, I think I can see that certainly being the case, and I think in terms of that point around, and people raise this in the comments sometimes, what happens if Levy says no, I'm not selling under any circumstance? We obviously are not party to any of the agreements because they're all in the Bahamas, because the ENIC entity is in the Bahamas, but there may be something in the agreements which says something like, well, look, if you're in a situation where you can't meet the cash requirement to be funded and you can't meet it alongside us, then we can force you to sell. That these types of arrangements can be in place in private equity type firms. So yeah, it wouldn't shock me if there's a way that they can force him to sell, obviously at a fair value and things like that. But yeah, I think that is probably the most likely next step. But it sounds like Lewis family are going to stay for a while.
Okay, interesting. I know we're very conscious. We've got to go for our first break. I know we're really up against time. You mentioned minority shareholder there, stakeholders, Con, and I feel like it feels like saying enter potentially Amanda Staveley, who was present at the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium over the weekend for the NFL game. And it's not the first time she's been at the stadium. And I think she was spotted at least 2 or 3 times last year, along with Daniel. Martin, would you read anything much into that? Because again, she's been part of that firm PCP that have basically come out and said they're not intending to make an offer. Obviously, people will know Amanda Staveley from being well connected and really behind Man City's initial takeover with Abu Dhabi. She also was part of the helpful group for PIF that got Newcastle United's takeover. What do you make of this Amanda Staveley, the fact that she's still in and around Tottenham? Should we read anything into that for you?
Well, she lives in London, and I'm sure she'd love to be involved. But obviously, she can't do anything for 6 months now or 5 months, so it's out of the frame in the short term. Look, her job is to put together consortia. She hasn't got the sort of money that's required. She put in a negligible sum relative at Newcastle, and then sold those shares before she paid for them effectively to a degree. Well, not illegally. That was the way. That was the agreement, and she did very well out of it. But we're talking about, I know it sounds silly, but it's tens of millions rather than billions. We're talking, so in terms of the money that would cost. Now we know that the asking price is upwards of 4.5 billion. Amanda Staveley has not got that. I mean, she just hasn't got it. But if she's got ins with the Qatari syndicate that aren't related to QSI, because if they are related to QSI, then QSI can't own Spurs and PSG and play in the Champions League. So it would have to be a separate Qatari or a separate Saudi that's not related to PIF. And all of these elements are, there are only so many in each country who've got this sort of money, I would have thought. I mean, maybe, I don't know, maybe there's 20,000 Qatari billionaires, but I don't think so when you've only got a population of, 1.8 million, of whom only 300,000 are actually Qataris. It's unlikely there's that many billionaires in Qatar. Likewise, there's only...
knowing Tottenham, we probably picked the one that hasn't got the money. Knowing Arla.
I still come up with the dough eventually. But so, look, I think that there'll be any... People who've got dough and think they can do a deal are going to try and put a deal together. There's nothing wrong with that. And again, but you've got to come up with a number that ENIC want to sell for, and would appear that number is going upwards rather than in the other direction. And therefore they've got to have a rationale behind asking for more than the nominal sum that Chelsea went for, although I still don't quite believe that that's what it actually cost, given that quite a bit of that money that the Bowley Group put in was actually to cover the legal expenses that were coming down the line, and we'll end up with a fine from the FA at some point pretty soon for dodgepot deals that were done under Abramovich.
Okay. I mean, do you share that as well, kind of with regards to Martin's point there on Amanda Staveley? Why is she still sniffing around Spurs? Why is she there in an NFL game? Is she there purely because she likes NFL and Tottenham's an easy destination to get to, or should we be reading anything more into that for you?
Maybe, but I mean, there is one point. So Martin's right. Obviously, if she can't come in to buy the entirety of Tottenham for 6 months unless she's invited to, because she's prohibited under the takeover code. But what she's not prohibited from doing is what we were talking about earlier, which would be, say, buying Levy's stake from Ealing, because that's not subject to the takeover code, because that's in the entity that's in the Bahamas. So, she could potentially, and it could already be done and being negotiated, right? We don't know. She could be putting together a consortium to buy out Levy's stake, right? But we don't know. We don't know whether that's going to happen. But yeah, it does seem odd that she seems to be hanging about. I think I think there probably is a little bit of a biased regret with I think if PIF had bought Tottenham rather than Newcastle, I think that they obviously, to Martin's earlier point, wouldn't have been subject to the PSR restrictions and UEFA financial rules restrictions, and would have really been able to spend perhaps what they might want to. But yeah, I think this is one of these we just need to keep a watching brief on, don't we?
Okay, so it's the final gauge on this before we talk about Frank and where we are with Spurs. Martin, from your perspective, I think you said kind of in the midway point of the show for you, you don't think there'll be any kind of movement in the near future at the moment. You think for now, the Lewis Trust or the Lewis family, ENIC and whatever they're going to be rebranded at the moment, are in it for the short to long term.
Unless someone comes in with a deal that makes them think, wow. But yeah, I think the way to increase the value is to plump up the beast. And that means improving the team, improving the squad, doing some better maybe commercial deals, that if they were to do the naming rights one or whatever, trying to find different ways of it's hard to find, as Conor said, to find more ways of raising income, because they've maxed out quite a lot of them and very successfully. We're going to, I reckon, probably getting close to 600 million revenues this year if they have a decent run in the decent Premier League season and a run to the latter stages of the Champions League. That's 250 million straight away from just those two competitions, plus the commercial income, and as we know, best part of 6 million from every home match. So you can suddenly get big numbers if you're doing well on the pitch as well, which therefore, of course, adds to the valuation of the club. But that's my sense that we will have talk about consortia for much of the next 18 months to 2 years before a deal is finally done.
Okay.
Whomever the owners will be, I have no idea, but I suspect that's where it will end up.
Conor, you share that as well as Martin there?
Yeah, I mean, the risk though, the risk that they're playing with is, you price out a lot of people at 3.5 billion. You price out even more once you get to 5 billion, obviously, naturally. And, those that are looking at the club now to buy it, perhaps, are looking at it's all the same reasons as to why the Lewis family might stay, right? They can see that there's a massive opportunity, because if they pump money into the football club, we've got no financial restrictions on us, and the infrastructure's there. You don't have to build a stadium, the training grounds all done, and now it's just future up skill and up growth, right? So exactly what appeals to the Lewis family about staying is what would appeal to new potential owners. If they look to sell in 18 months, 24 months, when they feel like they've got themselves that bit, then what's the benefit to that new potential owner at that stage, and they've lost a little bit of their potential growth, right? Because no matter what, there is going to be a limit on what Tottenham is going to be worth, right? There comes a point where there is a cap. Right. Yep. So, if in a world that Man United have, that Ratcliffe bought in at sort of 5 billion or something like that, right? 5 billion feels like a natural cap at the moment, probably for Tottenham. 5.5, maybe, if we really were able to start winning stuff regularly and really grow commercials and stuff. But that's going to take a little bit of time to filter through. So, yeah, I think it's an interesting point. I mean, there's some people that have the theory that, perhaps the Lewis family will never look to sell, right? Because they're not a traditional private equity company. It's family money, and perhaps they'll look to pass the Tottenham through the generations forevermore, right? And it's just an asset that they will hold, and they don't need to realise liquidity because they've got enough wealth as it is, right? I don't know if I definitely share that view. I think you could argue it either way, and I think there'll be lots of viewers hoping that isn't the case, right? Given what Phoenix's historic ambition has been on the footballing side compared to some of these alternative owners that we talk about. But yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how it plays out. I think this was it's been an interesting 6 months or so since I created my Twitter account. I think I joined the wave at the right time for talking about football finances at Tottenham.
Okay, final one, guys. Before we do move on, I want to do a quick 15 on Frank and where we're at. Daniel Levy's departure. Martin, we know you're Spurs through and through. We've loved having you on the show in the last decade, doing Last One on Spurs with us. I know we've asked Conor about this as well. Daniel Levy's exit, or whatever you want to call it at the moment, his non-involvement at Spurs, given the way, I'm going to go there. I said I wouldn't go there, but I am going to go there. The way Harry Kane left Tottenham, how realistic is the chance of Harry Kane coming back to Spurs, which would feel like a potential massive win for the Lewis family if they got him back to the club? And again, we don't know how much Harry wants to join Spurs, but if the opportunity was there, how realistic do you think that is for you? Very quickly.
I think there's more chance now than there was a month ago, but that doesn't mean that it's going to happen. And interesting today, when he was asked on England duty, he seemed to be hinting that he was even pondering signing an extended deal at Bayern Munich. But again, if you were thinking either way, you'd say that, because it'd be foolish not to. I still think he will return to the Premier League to try and beat the Shearer record. So Spurs do have first option when he wants to leave Bayern Munich under the contract that was signed, unless that lapses if he signs a new contract. I don't know, because again, I haven't seen the contract, so that could be part of it. I don't know, but I think there's a degree of vestigial love for the club that he would probably be, if he thought he could win something at Spurs, he'd love to. I genuinely think that, because then, you know, you get a statue as well as a mural, don't you? Whatever, another statue.
I think so.
Or whatever he gets.
Agree. Yeah. I mean, I think that would be one of the ways, I think, Conor, to bring him in before we do go for that very quick break. That would, you feel, be a massive win for the Lewis family, able to show their commitment to Spurs and the fans. If they were to lure back Harry Kane, you know, a player that still, I think, is still scoring at such an incredible rate, really, at the moment. I mean, he has not slowed down. Kane, for you, kind of very quickly, how realistic is that? Do you share those feelings that Martin shared there?
Yeah, I mean, he's hit new heights this season, it seems, doesn't it? I mean, it's outrageous the level, you know, at which he's scoring. I think he's already got 20, right, in all comps or something, right? So you compare that to what we're currently playing up top, there is there's somewhat of a stark difference. I'm not sure. I think when I was on a couple of weeks ago, Rick, and I felt like I was the Grim Reaper on this. I felt I could see him going to Barcelona. It feels like, you know, that type of, they love that type of deal. And maybe I'm just thinking that because Lewandowski has made that same journey, right? But you know, I could see that. But I take Martin's point. Maybe he wants to come back to the Prem to break Shearer's record. I think in some ways for Kane, as he's getting older and older, you know, La Liga would. I mean, he would absolutely smash La Liga as well. I think he would score bundles of goals for Barcelona, right? And it's probably a little bit less intense on his body as he gets older compared to the Premier League, in the same way perhaps the Bundesliga has been. But that's not to say if he comes back to the Premier League, clearly he's going to score goals still, right? He's just got that ability. But yeah, that's what I could see. But obviously, yeah, it's a massive PR win for the Lewis family if they were to bring him back, of course.
It would be. Look, we're going to turn our attention to Thomas Frank. Before we do, guys, we've got over 4,500 that are watching us live. As always, thank you ever so much for all your incredible support for Last One on Spurs. I'm joined alongside me by Connor over at Levy 1882. It's become a running trend that if me and Connor are going this late, something normally is happening around the Spurs sphere, and it's normally financial. And we've got the wonderful Martin Lipton back on the show, which I know we normally only see Martin in January and the summer. So even Martin might think, what's going on if I'm bringing him back in October? But we will try and bring Martin back in January. I know people love seeing Martin on this show, normally in January and the summer, because it normally means things are happening around Spurs. Just a very quick reminder out there for you guys, if you can keep liking and subscribing to the show, that'll be massively appreciated. We're also delighted once again to be up for the Football Content Awards 2025. We're finalists once again. Thank you for making that possible. If you can help us bring another trophy home to North London, to the Spurs Stadium, you can vote us in the best podcast in the Premier League and best in social creators. You can hit that QR code to vote. You can also follow our episode description link for more on that. You probably say now, the good news is for Frank, is that there's a sense of maybe, dare I say, use the word stability now. We kind of know where we stand at the moment, it feels, with Spurs in terms of we keep calling it the Lewis family or the Earick rebranded, however you want to describe it. Martin, you were smiling as you came into this show. It hasn't always been the case over this last 24 months. I'll bring you in on this point.
I've had some times.
We've had some times on here. Yeah, we've had some times.
Look, I mean, I said in the summer that I thought it was an excellent appointment. I've seen nothing to change my opinion.
Yeah,
I think what we have is an organisation and an ability to change up and to go, even if it was the last 10 minutes or 5 minutes on Saturday, to send on Danzo and play three at the back without, oh God, what are we going to do now? We're going to, and jumping into each other. Players who get what their jobs are. I don't think we're anything like what they need to be. I reckon in terms of performances, it's 6.5 out of 10. But in terms of results, it's 8.5 out of 10. And there's been some poor performances just in the last 2 weeks. I mean, it was ropey beyond belief against a very average Wolves team. And how they got away with it last week in Norway, I still don't know, because they were terrible. But somehow they found a way, because they got good players, to nick a 2-2 draw. Again, at times on Saturday, they were hanging on. There's more resilience, there's more resolve, there's more grit.
Yeah.
And there are players who can break a game open.
Yep.
There wasn't when that ball goes down the right hand side in the second half at Leeds. Kudus is second favourite. When the ball bounces to him, he's got an awful lot to do, but he gets the shot away and gets a bit of luck with the deflection. But it was because he had the willingness to drive on, and that's the positive. I said what we really do need is a centre forward who's an actual centre forward, because although Tell scored a goal and it's a good goal, I still think he's actually better at this stage of his career playing off the flank. I've yet to be convinced by Odebear, I've got to be honest. Richarlison looks to be struggling. Couple of games I've seen, he's been really, really struggling. I mean, I was at that Villarreal game. He barely got a kick, and then Wolves, he was worse than that. And he scored 3 goals this year, and one of those an important goal at Brighton. Obviously, 2 great goals first game of the season, but he hasn't looked like scoring too often. The good thing, I guess, is that when you're only conceding a goal a game, if you get one, you've got a good chance of at least a draw. If you get 2, you've got a good chance of a win.
Yep.
When you're conceding 2 goals a game, as we were for long periods last season, the best you're going to get is a draw, more often than not. And I think that's the difference. I think Vicario's had a couple of dodgy moments, but actually made a lot of big saves as well. I mean, the last minute save on Saturday was it saved us. It's won us 2 points. And you might say he could have done better with the goal. I think the two he's conceded, he's been a bit unlucky with, and that he's made the save, and then it sort of bounced off a dodgy part of his anatomy and ended up presenting chances. But in the main, he's not terrible. Although there's an argument that Kinski deserves a run out in some of these European games, I think, to keep him match sharp, because just playing League Cup's not going to be enough. Although it'd be ahead of a game up at Newcastle later in the month, because that'd be tough. But in the main, it's been all right. I mean, I don't think the 2 holding midfielders necessarily works when you're trying to make the game. When you play both Paulinho and Bentancur, I think it looks a bit samey. But other than that, there's far more positives than negatives. They definitely are the negatives are outweighed by the positives. And it's 1 defeat in 11 against a very good team in Bournemouth. You want to play Bournemouth in April and May when they're knackered and run out of players, not when they're fit, because they're a very, very adept team. And if we could nick their left wing, I'd be a very happy bunny, because I think he's an outstanding player. Terrific talent. And, he plays for Ghana, but he's grown up in England, hasn't he? Grown up in London. He's very much one of that sort of Ghanaian diaspora, which is fantastic. And good luck to him, and great that they haven't qualified for the African nations, because we don't lose Kudus, which we would have done, but unfortunately doesn't mean we play Semenya playing for Bournemouth when we go down there. But there's some very, very, that's the 1 defeat, few draws, but more wins than draws. 2 points a game in the Premier League, 2 points a game over 38 games. It's obviously 76. That will get you 3rd or 4th most seasons. What we want is Champions League football. Probably means top 5, but we know top 4 is a guarantee of that. There you go. These are the things we're looking for. Averaging 2 points a game, you're in the mix. It's exactly what we want. We've only exceeded 76, I think, on 1 occasion. When we got 83, was it under Pochettino? We came second to Chelsea.
That's right. Yeah, but that is right.
It's a pretty high point score. We haven't done it very often, clearly. So let's be pleased with where things are. Yes, still a lot to go. There needs to be more cohesion in the attacking sphere. I'm not quite sure yet that we've seen, and we haven't yet seen what Xavi Simons is going to offer. And please, can you stop doing Raboners when you've got 2 spare men on the left, 30 yards out from the opposition goal? What the hell was that?
I couldn't believe that. I was a one-off.
I love the little looped pass for Porro.
Yes.
In that channel between the left back and the left centre half, and he couldn't quite get on the end of it properly, but that was quality. Those are the passes that unlock defences. We know he's got that. So there's lots of things that are good, a few things that are bad, but where we were even this time last year, but certainly this, in February, March, irrespective of what happened in Bilbao in May, you feel far better about it. You feel as if you've got a plan, you've got a manager who knows what's working, who knows what needs to be worked on. And is trying to develop an adaptability and a degree of poise in the team that hasn't been there. Even when they were playing well under Postecoglou, and there were some great performances, let's not pretend they weren't.
No, there was some good ones.
It always felt uncontrolled. It always felt on the margins. It always felt that they were absolutely having to fly around like lunatics to get there. That isn't the case anymore. That's Liverpool won the league last year because they had more control than anybody else, and they had a stellar season from Salah and a great goalkeeper. But the key to that was control. The key to Arsenal's success or near success, but being the second best team relative over the last 3 years, is control. We haven't had control. That doesn't mean negativity.
No.
It means purpose and poise and shape and adaptability and certainty and not panicking.
Yeah, I do agree on that point. Before I close with Martin, just over to you, Con. Like I say, we've finally broken this curse of the international break. I know many were thinking it's coming round again. But look, we have finally broken it. You know, unbelievable, really. We failed to win 7 consecutive matches that took place before an international break, but we did break it, first time in 2 years. And as Martin has said there, we've played 11 competitive games so far under Frank. We've only lost 1 of them. If we're looking in 90 minutes, that is, we've scored 21 goals in those games, conceded just 9, 5 clean sheets. We're currently 3rd in the league. Where are we, Con, for you in terms of Frank and the project at Tottenham?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's been a fantastic start for Frank when you consider all of the context of where we're coming from last season. Massive upheaval, brand new manager, brand new coaching staff. You know, the team, to Martin's point, looks way more solid and stable, and hopefully more sustainable in the way that it plays going forward. I think obviously we all want to see a bit more creative from open play, but at the same time we are missing 4 attacking players at the moment. You know, Solanke, Mwani, Kulusevski, Maddison. We didn't sign a left winger, which we all know we desperately needed to sign in the summer. So you know, he's having to make solutions for that. I think when we compare to last year, I think we have to remember that, you know, handball was a bit of a myth last year as well, right? We were pretty horrendous to watch for the majority of the season, even ignoring the losses, just in terms of the way we actually play football as well, right? And even in the good performances last year, like when, you know, we beat City, for example, there were spells in games. It wasn't like swashbuckling attacking football for 90 minutes. We would have this like 15, 20-minute burst, and then, you know, it would be a little bit all over the place again. So, you know, I think it's going to take time, and football fans unfortunately lack patience. I think the other thing we have to remember as well is that compared to Arsenal, God forbid, Liverpool and City, we have now fallen far behind, right, because of the way that the club has operated over the last few years. So it's going to take time to close that gap. And I think when fans look at our results sometimes, you know, they look at it through the lens of, okay, you know, these are the games we need to be winning every game. But when you actually look at the teams we're competing with for right now, which is we shouldn't be, we should be competing at the very top. But right now we're competing with the likes of Newcastle, Villa, etc. for that sort of 5th position, probably 4th or 5th. You know, those teams are very inconsistent as well. Aston Villa have had a terrible start to the season. Newcastle have been a bit meh. Even Chelsea have had decent fixtures on paper, and they got a big result of the weekend. But before that, you know, they're still below us in the league, and they've had decent fixtures. So I think we just have to think of all of that context. And for me, I think it's, you know, I think it's been a really, really good start and positive, and I think everyone should look forward to seeing how it can develop as Frank and Cochrane and the rest of the team get more and more time working with the team.
Final question to close it on to you both. Can I start with you and end with Martin? What's more important for this squad this season, top 4 or a trophy? Top 5 or a trophy?
For the squad or for fans? Or for I suppose you could. Yeah, I mean, look, we'd love to see a trophy. I do think it's important for the football club that we get Champions League again, because I think I think that will just help us sign the similar caliber of players that we've started to see come through in like Simmons and Kudus and Paolini. Obviously, we'd all love a trophy though, but unfortunately, with domestic trophies, it's somewhat how fortunate you get with a draw, right? And we've unfortunately got a very difficult League Cup draw, going, as Martin mentioned earlier, going away to Newcastle. That's not going to be an easy game. So we'll have to see. But yeah, what I would say, Rick, is we shouldn't have to forfeit completely one in
I
return
agree.
for the other, which is what we've had to do.
I thought that's what you were going to. I thought that's what you were going to say to me. I thought you were going to say, Rick, we can do both. I thought that's what you were going to say to me.
Yes. Yeah, we can do both. So that I think fifth is definitely achievable for Tottenham this year, depending on how injuries go, and then obviously with the cups, it just depends how the draw falls.
Okay, Martin's got the pleasure because he can answer as a journalist or a fan, depending on what hat he wants to wear and close us on. But no pressure, Martin. It is over about 4,500 that are watching us, so you've got the final word on Spurs. What's more important this season, the trophy or top five, or both?
As I said, I want to believe that anything is possible if things go well. What I do think is really interesting is there is not the same desperate yearning that there was. That doesn't mean that people want to win a trophy any less.
Of course, you're right.
That hasn't changed. The difference being that if they were to get to a final, there's not the same pressure of they've got to win. They can't win a trophy. They're trophy dodgers. Well, they're not. Those players. So that's gone completely.
Yeah, they're winners. You're right.
One ridiculous night when it was the worst game of football I've ever seen, but with a joyful result.
Yeah.
And it changes the dynamic around the squad and the club, as it was always going to. And I, as I said last time, I don't think any of us really truly recognise the depth of the emotional response to that night. The sheer joy that lasted throughout the summer. I went to I wasn't at the game in Bilbao, but I was at the Brighton game on the Sunday, and I've never known you lose 4-1 at home and you're absolutely woeful, and everyone's laughing and smiling, because the thing that mattered was ending that, to stuff that crowing from elsewhere back into people's mouths. So suddenly it changes the attitude of the club. You want to win something. The idea of playing football is to try and win. Of course, it's hard to do.
Yep.
But also, as Conor said, there's a financial imperative that makes the value of Champions League. Before kicking a ball this season, Spurs had won 40 with the Super Cup, 48 million before they kicked a ball from Europe. That's an awful lot of money, and that allows you to do an awful lot of things. So, a good season in the Champions League is £100 million for Tottenham, because they're at the top of or relatively high in the various coefficient charts, and also because of the calculation that's based on the TV pool, with England being the second biggest pool behind France. So there's a huge benefit from that, of just being in it. And look at the cost it's having on Manchester United not being in it. United are still the biggest club, but they're losing that certain thing about being Manchester United, because they're not at the top table anymore. So you want to be there, and it's really important that you are. That doesn't mean the Spurs have to be there every year, but they want you want to be there more often than not, and therefore top five finishes make that happen. At the same time, why can't you win a cup as well? I wouldn't want to sacrifice one for the other at this juncture.
Yeah.
Come back to me in April, May, and maybe you make a different call, don't you?
We're going to come back to you in January, Martin. That's what we are going to do. It's been an always absolute pleasure. I want to say a massive thank you to Conor at Levy 1882. Conor's work isn't done yet this week, Con. Thank you so much. Always a pleasure, mate. And I guess we'll see what Tottenham brings under the ENIC Lewis rebrand, right, Con? Keep an eye and see what happens.
Yeah, we will, and we'll judge them accordingly. Don't worry. But yeah, thanks for having me on, Rick, and great to be on with you, Martin, as well. Really lovely to meet you.
Absolute pleasure. Absolute pleasure. As Martin, I'm going to say goodbye to Martin. We're just getting some quotes through from Harry Kane, actually. I think these may have been embargo quotes. He says, in terms of staying longer at Bayern, I could definitely see that. I've not had those conversations yet, but if they were to arise, I would be willing to talk and have an honest conversation with them. In terms of the Premier League, I don't know. If you asked me when I first left to go to Bayern, I would have said for sure I would come back. Now that it's been a couple of years, I would probably say that has gone down a little bit, but I wouldn't say I would never go back. But I am fully all in at Bayern. If there was to be a conversation around extending, we will see. But I've still got another season and to go. It's not like at my age, there's any panic. I'm calm. I love the manager. I love being at Bayern. I'm happy to see what I can achieve. So fascinating. Harry Kane, who knows when it's going to leave. But Martin, it's been a pleasure. We're going to let you go now. We'll be back with you in January for, I'm sure, where Spurs are flying high and where transfer windows are aloof. Martin, where can everybody find you for all the latest Tottenham news from your side?
Well, very much of that. I'll do my best. I'm still working on a daily basis in the Sun. I'm still on X at Martin Lipton, and I'm available at all good booksellers, as they say.
Love that. And people did say to me, was that Martin in the background at Villarreal? It was Martin in the background at Villarreal. So who knows when Martin might be cropping up, talking to Frank across the season. Martin, it's been a pleasure. You're an absolute star. We're going to see you in the new year. From myself, from the wonderful Martin Lipton, from the superb Conor over at Levynomics 1882. We have been the last word on Spurs. Let's see what comes next from us all. Keep safe, keep well, and as always, come on you Spurs.